Glad to see at least everybody get quiet. No, we were getting in now? Okay. Before we begin the second half, and people are coming in now, a few people wanted me to say a few words just about tomorrow, our conference tomorrow, for which the concert is the prelude. Now, the intention of the conference, and much of this is in the notes, so you can get to read about this in your program, is that we are creating what we call a National Conservatory movement. Many of you are familiar with the Schiller Institute and what we do. Tomorrow, we're going to demonstrate the content of what we do in a very, very powerful way, a way that might be, I think, speaking immodestly, perhaps one of the most powerful things ever done in the United States, in that we are contending that the classical lead, or art song, and the African American spiritual are identical. They are not identical in form per se, although in fact those who are more literate on this topic and much more much better versed on it than I am will be doing a panel tomorrow in which I think some very interesting insights will be brought to that venture. We're also declaring something else. We're declaring that, in fact, there is no essential difference between the work done by a classical musician, by an artist who is performing a classical musical piece, and the work that is done by an artist performing properly an African American spiritual. We are saying that there are no fundamental differences in the universal nature of classical composition, and classical does not refer to simply some Western European classical term or Western European classical art, the way that that's been taught, mistaught. There's something else, however, which is classical, and it has to do with the nature of man, and man in the image of God, whatever may be your religious persuasion or lack of one. The fact is that man is distinguished from the beast by his ability to sing, to laugh and to sing and to think. And in this area, in this domain, began what we call civilization. The poet Percy Shelley spoke of the fact that poetry was connate with the origin of man. When man first began to be man, he sang. And that's the origin of language. Language originates in singing. And that all science, all scientific inquiry goes back to that. Every culture in the world has that as a legacy. Every culture in the world practices that. And that the problem of our scientific thinkers and others is to get out of the formalisms, get out of the categories, rise above those categories and see and to identify and demonstrate what is unity, what is unified about all of us, what's identical about all of us. Really, it is impossible, at least in my view, that any significant change will occur in the United States or any other nation of a profound nature which is not based on identifying, demonstrating, and practicing this principle at the base of what we might call literacy. And everybody here knows that literacy is a great problem in our country. It's a great problem around other parts of the world, although it's not the same problem in other parts of the world. We know it in Washington, D.C. We know it in many other cities. It's not a black problem. It's not a white problem. We are an illiterate nation. But to get to become literate, one has to value ideas. But to value ideas, one must learn how to sing. And this idea of singing, this profound sacred trust which singing is, which was last, to my mind, practiced in the United States by Dr. Martin Luther King, outside of the domain of singing as such, as you have already heard and you've seen by many of the performers that you've already seen and will see, that practice must be returned to the pores, the capillaries of the society. And that's what we're going to do. A cultural literacy project, a literacy project in which singing is at the root of teaching people how to read, write, and think. That was the hallmark of the liberation of the African American from slavery, teaching people to read. Roland Hayes' father, who wrote the Spiritual Crucifixion, was killed for doing that. So when you start talking about music and you start talking about the idea of actually teaching people literacy through music, you were talking about the most profound kind of change in the human character, And that's what Dvorak was offering to teach when he came to this country. Not that he was teaching the people who sang the spirituals, he was collaborating with people like Harry Burleigh and others on a great experiment which worked. And it was because it worked that it was stopped. It's a great war, real war, cultural war. And that kind of idea of understanding the value of who we are and making that value itself expressed in its own integrity and dignity, that is the idea of a movement for a national conservatory. We coined that after Marian Anderson, both in her honor and because she's one of the highest expressions of this idea of beauty, grace, and dignity all wrapped up into one. And that's really what our idea is, and that's what the project is about. So tomorrow, one of the things I want to indicate is that there will be in the afternoon panel the universal nature of classical composition, the lead in the African American spiritual. Two of the speakers of that panel will be George Shirley, whom you've just heard, and William Warfield, who you will hear in a few moments. And I would advise that all who enjoy what they are hearing tonight might come tomorrow and be part of, and participants in that panel. That will be also here at the chapel. And now I would like to both beg your indulgence on the one hand and also give something to you. Reverend James Coakley, who was unable to be here at the time of doing the original invocation, is here now. And he is going to lead us in prayer for a second time. I don't think you'll mind, particularly when you see what he will do. And I'm going to ask him and Dr. Jackson, Raymond Jackson, to come up now, there in the back, and to do that second invocation. A bit unusual, but I think you'll enjoy it.